Once upon a time in a large and bustling city, there lived a billionaire named Sam. He had everything a man could dream of: fancy cars, a mansion, and more money than he could ever spend. But despite all his wealth, Sam felt lonely. He knew people only saw his money and power, not his heart. Sam had been in many relationships, but none of the women truly loved him. They were all drawn to his wealth, not to the man he was inside. The more this happened, the emptier Sam felt. He wanted someone who would love him for who he really was, not because he could buy them expensive things. One day, Sam came up with an idea. He would leave behind his luxurious life and go undercover. He decided to pretend to be a crippled beggar. He thought that if he could meet someone who would care for him while he appeared poor and helpless, that person might truly love him. Sam told his parents about his plan, and they were very worried. His mother, a well-known businesswoman, and his father, a powerful politician, tried to talk him out of it. "Sam, you could be recognized. What if someone dangerous finds out who you are? You could be kidnapped or harmed," his father said, his voice filled with concern. "I'll be careful. I'm going far away to a place where no one knows me," Sam reassured them. He was determined to find real love, no matter the risks. His mind was made up. He left his mansion behind and traveled to a small village far from the city. There, he dressed in old, torn clothes and sat in a wheelchair. He rolled himself to a quiet street corner, hoping no one would recognize him. With his hand outstretched, he began to beg. "Please help me," he whispered, hoping someone would stop. He felt nervous and vulnerable. It was the first time in his life he had ever asked for anything from strangers. For days, Sam sat on the street watching people pass by. Most didn't even look at him, some gave him a quick glance before hurrying away. He had never felt so invisible in his life. But then one day, a girl named Gifty came by. Gifty was different. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a gentle spirit. She didn't have much herself, her family was poor, and her father, Francis, worked hard on their small farm to make ends meet. But despite her struggles, Gifty always found a way to smile. As Gifty walked past Sam's spot, she noticed him sitting in his wheelchair, looking tired and hungry. Her heart softened. She stopped and bent down, looking into his eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Sam was taken by surprise. It had been days since anyone had spoken to him. "I'm just trying to get by," he said, trying to sound weak. Gifty looked into her small purse. She didn't have much money, but she couldn't walk away without helping him. "Here," she said, handing him a few coins. "I know it's not much, but it's all I have right now." Sam felt a lump in his throat. Her kindness touched him in a way that money never had. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." Gifty smiled softly. "Do you have a place to stay?" she asked. Sam shook his head. "No," he said, feeling a little guilty for lying. Gifty thought for a moment. "I live with my father. Our house is small. I would have loved to help you, but I don't know if my father will agree to it." Gifty hurried home, her heart still heavy with concern for the beggar she had met. As she walked into the small house, she found her father, Francis, resting after a long day's work on their farm. His face, though worn from years of labor, still carried the warmth and kindness that she loved so much. "Father, I met someone in the village today," Gifty began, her voice hesitant. A man, a beggar, sitting on the street in a wheelchair. He looked so tired and hungry. Francis's eyes softened as he listened. "What did you do, Gifty?" "I gave him some of the little money I had left, but he told me he has no place to stay," Gifty explained. "I wanted to help him, but I didn't know if it was the right thing to do. Should I have done more?" Francis sighed deeply, thinking about the man Gifty had described. "You can't leave him out there alone in the night," he finally said. "No one should be left to suffer when we have a roof over our heads. Go back and bring him here. We'll make room for him." Gifty smiled, grateful for her father's compassion. Without wasting any time, she grabbed her shawl and hurried back to the spot where she had left the man. When she returned, Sam was still sitting in his wheelchair, looking lost in thought. She approached him carefully, her soft voice cutting through the evening air. "My father said you can't stay out here alone tonight," she said gently. "Come with me. We'll give you a place to sleep." Sam blinked, surprised by the offer. He had never expected such kindness from strangers, and his heart swelled with emotion. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "You don't have to say anything," Gifty replied with a kind smile. "Just let us help you." With Gifty's assistance, Sam made his way back to her small, humble home. As he crossed the threshold, he couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and safety that he hadn't felt in a long time. Gifty and her father had so little, yet they were willing to share what they had with a man they barely knew. As Sam settled into the modest room they had prepared for him, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he had finally found what he was looking for. But with his heart full of gratitude, he also felt a growing sense of guilt. He was living a lie, pretending to be something he was not. Sam spent his first night in Gifty and Francis's home feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. The room was small, but it was clean and welcoming. As he lay on the thin mattress, he listened to the sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves outside. For the first time in a long while, he felt safe. Gifty brought him a bowl of warm soup, and Sam savored each sip. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes filled with kindness. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. "We want to help you." "Thank you," Sam replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know how much this means to me." Over the next few days, Gifty and Francis took care of Sam. They helped him with his daily needs and even made a small garden for him to sit in. Sam enjoyed spending time with Gifty. She was funny and smart, and he found himself laughing more than he had in years. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, Gifty looked at him with concern. "You seem sad sometimes," she said. "Is there something on your mind?" Sam wanted to share everything with her, but he held back. I'm grateful to be here," he replied, forcing a smile. "I've been through a lot." Gifty nodded, but Sam could see she wanted to know more. He felt a pang of guilt. How could he enjoy this happiness while hiding who he really was? Meanwhile, back in the city, Sam's parents were growing increasingly worried. They hadn't heard from him since he left, and it was unlike him to go without his phone. Every night, his mother sat by the window, praying for her son's safety. Her heart ached with worry. Where could he be, she wondered aloud, her voice thick with emotion. "This is our only son. He should have told us where he was going." Sam's father tried to stay calm for his wife's sake, but he couldn't hide his concern. "I'm sure he's fine," he said, though he felt a knot in his stomach. "He's probably just taking a break from everything. You know how he is." But each passing day without news made them more anxious. Sam's mother would cry, praying that he was safe wherever he was. One cool evening, Francis sat beside Sam in the small garden. He had been meaning to ask how Sam ended up in a wheelchair. Sam paused, his heart racing, and shared his story. He had been in an accident a few months ago, his car skidded off the road, and while he was lucky to survive, his legs were badly injured. Sam explained that the doctors had told him he could walk again, but he needed a surgery that was far too expensive for him. Francis felt deep sympathy. It was a terrible thing for a man to suffer through. Sam tried to mask his pain, but Francis could see it. He decided in his heart that he couldn't let Sam continue like this, they had to do something. The next morning, Francis pulled Gifty aside over breakfast. He spoke of Sam's condition and his need for surgery. They didn't have enough money, but Francis suggested they start small. They could sell some of their farm's produce, fruits, vegetables, maybe even some of the livestock. It wouldn't raise all the money at once, but it could be a start. Gifty admired her father's generosity and determination. They didn't have much, but Francis always believed in helping others. They decided to keep it a secret from Sam, fearing that he might refuse the help. Gifty began working harder on the farm, picking fruits and vegetables to sell at the village market. Francis took care of the heavier tasks, ensuring their small farm was as productive as possible. Together, they focused on gathering enough produce to make a difference. At the market, Gifty worked tirelessly, offering their fresh fruits and vegetables to passers-by. People in the village appreciated the quality of the produce, and sales were steady. But one day, Judah, a wealthy young man from the city, approached her again. Judah had been trying to get Gifty's attention for months. Every time he came to the village, he offered her gifts and promises of a luxurious life if she would only marry him. This time was no different. Judah made his usual proposal, boasting about the wealth and comfort he could provide. He spoke of the mansion she would live in, the fine clothes she would wear, and the ease of city life. But Gifty remained calm, politely declining his offer. She had no interest in the life Judah was offering. Though her life was humble, it gave her peace. Her heart was drawn to a different kind of wealth, the kindness and compassion she found in helping others, and the growing connection she felt with Sam. Judah, frustrated by her rejection, grew impatient. "Why would you choose to stay in this village, selling vegetables, when you could have a life of luxury with me?" he demanded, his voice laced with anger. "You're a fool to live in poverty when you could have everything." Despite his harsh words, Gifty remained firm. She didn't want Judah or his promises. Her life, though simple, was filled with purpose, and she had no regrets. Angry and insulted, Judah stormed away. Back at home, Francis and Gifty continued their efforts to raise money for Sam's surgery. Every coin they earned from selling produce went into a secret fund. No matter how hard they worked, it seemed like they could never save enough. But their determination never wavered. One afternoon, Janet, Gifty's best friend, came by her house. Her expression was serious, but her visit had a hidden motive. Earlier that day, Judah had approached Janet and handed her money, asking her to help convince Gifty to marry him. He was growing tired of her rejections and figured Janet might succeed where he had failed. Feeling important, Janet agreed. After all, she thought Judah was a good match for Gifty, rich, handsome, and ready to take her away from the hardships of village life. As they sat together, Janet casually brought up the topic of Judah, reminding Gifty how many times he had come to the village just to ask for her hand. She emphasized the wealth and comfort that awaited her if she said yes. Gifty, calm as always, shook her head. "I'm not interested in Judah," she said firmly. Janet pushed further, describing the life Judah could provide. "You could live in the city, have beautiful clothes, and never have to work in the market again. Why would you choose this life over that?" But Gifty remained unwavering. She revealed something that shocked Janet. She thought she was starting to fall in love with Sam. Janet froze, unable to believe what she had just heard. "Sam? That poor, crippled man who has nothing to his name," she exclaimed. Her shock quickly turned to anger. She couldn't understand why her friend would choose someone like Sam when she had a chance with a man as wealthy as Judah. "You're throwing your life away for a beggar," Janet snapped, her voice rising. "Do you think love will feed you? Will it build you a house?" Gifty listened quietly, but her mind was made up. She valued Sam's kind heart over Judah's wealth. "If you can't support my decision, then maybe you shouldn't come here anymore," she said calmly. "I don't want to keep having this conversation." Furious and hurt, Janet stormed out of the house. She went straight to Judah and told him everything: Gifty's refusal, her growing feelings for Sam, and her determination to reject his wealth and status. Judah was livid. The idea that Gifty could choose a poor, crippled man over him was unthinkable. His anger boiled inside him, and he vowed to do whatever it took to change her mind. At the same time, Janet, still fuming, began to question why she had been so willing to help Judah in the first place. She had always been by his side, always supported him, but he had never noticed her. Why was he so obsessed with Gifty? Judah's anger consumed him as he stormed around his luxurious city home. He couldn't fathom why Gifty would choose a poor cripple like Sam over someone as wealthy and powerful as himself. His pride wouldn't allow him to walk away. He decided to take drastic measures to force Gifty into seeing things his way. Meanwhile, back in the village, Sam grew closer to Gifty and Francis. Their kindness and warmth made him feel something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. Every evening, Gifty would sit with him in the garden, sharing stories about her life and her dreams. The way she spoke, her passion for helping others, touched Sam's heart deeply. He felt himself falling for her, but the guilt of his deception loomed over him. One evening, as they sat under the stars, Gifty turned to Sam with a gentle smile. "You've brought something special into my life," she said softly. "I've always believed that kindness has a way of coming back to us, and meeting you feels like a blessing." Sam's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he wasn't the poor, helpless man she thought he was, but fear held him back. What if she didn't feel the same way once she knew? The next day, Francis noticed Sam's growing unease. As they worked in the garden together, he said, "You've been good for Gifty, you know. She hasn't smiled this much in years. But I sense you're carrying a heavy burden. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Sam nodded, appreciating the older man's wisdom, but he still couldn't bring himself to reveal his secret. Unbeknownst to them, Judah had concocted a plan. He returned to the village under the guise of buying farmland but secretly began spreading rumors about Sam. He told villagers that Sam was a fraud, a man pretending to be poor to take advantage of kind-hearted people like Gifty and Francis. The rumors spread quickly, and soon, whispers filled the air. "Do you think it's true?" one villager asked another. "He's always so quiet, and we don't know anything about him." "I heard he's been seen talking to rich city folks in secret," another said. "Maybe he's just here to trick them." The gossip reached Janet, who was still bitter about her argument with Gifty. Seeing an opportunity to hurt her friend, Janet added fuel to the fire. "I wouldn't trust him," she told anyone who would listen. "Who knows what he's hiding?" The rumors eventually reached Francis, who confronted Sam one evening. "There's talk in the village about you," he said carefully. "People are saying you're not who you claim to be." Sam's heart sank. He realized he couldn't hide the truth any longer. Taking a deep breath, he decided it was time to come clean. "You're right," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I haven't been honest with you or Gifty. My name is Sam, and I'm not a beggar. I'm a billionaire from the city." Francis's eyes widened in shock. "A billionaire," he repeated, struggling to process the revelation. "Yes," Sam continued. "I left my life behind because I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am, not for my money. When I met Gifty, I saw the kindness and sincerity I've been searching for. But I know I've deceived you, and I wouldn't blame you if you asked me to leave." Before Francis could respond, Gifty walked in, having overheard the conversation. Her face was a mixture of shock and betrayal. "You lied to us?" she asked, her voice shaking. "All this time, you were pretending?" "I never meant to hurt you," Sam pleaded. "I just wanted to find something real, and with you, I did. Please, believe me." Gifty shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "How can I trust anything you've said? You've made a fool of me, of my father, of everything we've done for you." Francis, sensing the tension, stepped in. "Let's not make any rash decisions tonight. Sam, I think you need to give Gifty some space to think." That night, Gifty wrestled with her emotions. Part of her felt betrayed, but another part couldn't ignore the connection she had felt with Sam. Meanwhile, Sam stayed awake, consumed by regret and fear of losing her. The next morning, Judah arrived at Francis's home, emboldened by the rumors. He found Gifty working in the garden and approached her with a smug smile. "I told you that man wasn't what he seemed," he said. "You deserve better, Gifty. Come with me to the city, and I'll give you the life you've always dreamed of." But Gifty wasn't swayed. She stood tall, her voice firm. "I don't want your life, Judah. I may be hurt, but that doesn't mean I'll settle for someone like you. Please leave." Enraged, Judah stormed off, vowing to make Sam pay for stealing Gifty's heart. Janet had everything Judah could want. She was beautiful, her family was rich, and she carried herself with class and style. What more could a man ask for? Janet, frustrated and heartbroken, confronted Judah right then and there. She asked him why he was wasting his time chasing Gifty when she was right in front of him. She reminded him of her beauty, her wealth, and her social status. She offered herself as the woman who could give him everything he wanted. But Judah didn't even flinch. His heart was set on Gifty. To him, Gifty was everything Janet wasn't: humble, homely, well-mannered, and grounded. Judah valued the simplicity and quiet strength Gifty carried, things that Janet lacked. Hearing Judah praise Gifty, Janet's jealousy grew into hatred. She despised the way men, especially Judah, were always attracted to Gifty. No matter how hard she tried, she could never draw the same attention. And now, with Judah rejecting her for a poor girl like Gifty, her envy turned into something darker. From that moment on, Janet carried a deep resentment for Gifty, a resentment that would only grow with time. As Janet walked away from Judah, her mind raced with thoughts of how to tear Gifty down. Judah's rejection had stung, but what hurt more was that Gifty, the girl who had nothing, seemed to have all the love and admiration that Janet craved. As the days passed, Gifty and Francis worked tirelessly selling fruits and vegetables in the village market, but no matter how hard they tried, the money they raised was nowhere near enough for Sam's surgery. Francis knew he couldn't let this go on. Sam's condition weighed heavily on his heart, and he had grown to care deeply for the young man. He couldn't stand by and watch Sam's hope for recovery slip away, knowing that surgery was his only chance to walk again. One evening, after a long day at the farm, Francis made a decision. He had 2 pieces of land, the only valuable things he owned. His ancestors had passed them down to him, and they were his family's last connection to their heritage. But Francis was a man of great compassion, and Sam's suffering was too much for him to bear. That night, he decided to sell one of the lands to raise enough money for Sam's surgery. The following day, Francis quietly sold the land. His heart ached, knowing what he was giving up, but he couldn't let that stop him. This was Sam's chance to be free from the wheelchair, and it was a sacrifice he was willing to make. Francis returned home with the money in hand, eager to share the news with Sam. When he arrived, he found Sam sitting quietly in the small living room, gazing out the window. The evening sun cast a soft light through the open door. With a smile, Francis told Sam that the money for his surgery was ready, that he had sold his land to make it possible. Sam's face went pale. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This poor man, who barely had enough to provide for his family, had sold his land, his only source of wealth, for his sake. Guilt hit Sam like a wave, and he couldn't stay silent any longer. He had already taken too much from this family, and now they were sacrificing everything for him. Sam swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he began to confess. He told Francis the truth, that he wasn't really a beggar, that he wasn't poor. He explained how he was actually a wealthy man, a billionaire, who had come to the village disguised to find true love. He had wanted to escape the women who only loved him for his money, so he created this lie to see if someone would love him for who he truly was. Francis stood frozen, listening in disbelief as Sam revealed the full story. The air in the room felt heavy with the weight of Sam's words. After a long silence, Francis's face hardened. Without saying a word, he stormed out of the house, unable to process the betrayal. He walked to a quiet corner of the yard and sank to his knees, his heart broken as tears filled his eyes. This man, whom he had trusted, had been lying to them from the start. Francis had sold his land, his family's legacy, for a lie. He had believed in Sam's suffering, and now it felt like everything was crumbling around him. Gifty had been nearby and saw her father rush out of the house. She hurried inside to find Sam sitting there, his face filled with guilt. She demanded to know what had happened. Sam, already consumed by shame, confessed to her just as he had to her father. Gifty stood there, speechless at first, her emotion swirling. When the truth finally hit her, anger surged through her body. She looked at Sam with a mixture of disbelief and rage. All this time, she and her father had been working hard, sacrificing what little they had, all because they believed he was in desperate need. How could he have lied to them like this? How could he make them suffer, knowing they were giving everything for him? Tears welled up in her eyes as her anger took over. Without holding back, Gifty unleashed her frustration, her voice filled with hurt. She told Sam how cruel his deception had been, how much pain he had caused them. Her father had sold their land, their last hope for a better future, all for someone who had never needed their help in the first place. Gifty's heart felt shattered. She had begun to care for Sam, had started to see a future with him, but now all she saw was betrayal. Sam tried to explain. He pleaded with her to understand his intentions, telling her that he had never meant to hurt them. But Gifty couldn't listen. The weight of what had happened was too much for her to bear. She turned her back on him, tears streaming down her face, and walked away to her room. There, alone, she let her tears fall freely. She cried for her father, who had given everything, and for herself, for having believed in a man who had deceived them so deeply. The house was quiet that night, the air thick with pain and betrayal. Francis stayed outside, lost in his own grief, while Gifty cried herself to sleep. Sam, filled with regret, sat alone, unsure of how to fix the damage he had caused. Word of Sam's true identity spread through the village like wildfire. It didn't take long before everyone knew that the poor, crippled beggar was actually a billionaire. Whispers filled the air as neighbors gathered in corners to discuss the shocking news. The man they had pitied for months was not who they thought. Many were in disbelief, but soon the facts became clear, and no one could deny the truth. When the news reached Judah, it felt like the ground beneath him was shaking. He realized in an instant that his dreams of winning Gifty's heart were over. How could he compete with a billionaire? The woman he had spent so long chasing would never look his way now. He knew it was the end of the road for him, and his desperation grew. With no other options, Judah decided to visit Janet. He arrived at her house, his pride bruised, but determined to salvage what he could. Standing before her, he told Janet that he was ready to be with her, ready to start a relationship now that Gifty had rejected him. He hoped Janet would take him back and forget the past. But Janet's response wasn't what he expected. Janet burst into loud laughter, her voice echoing through the room. She looked at Judah with a mix of amusement and disdain. "You must be out of your mind," she said, "to think I would ever marry someone like you." Judah stood there, stunned, his heart sinking. Janet continued, her words sharp and cutting. "Do you really think I don't know the truth? You've been flaunting your boss's cars and clothes, pretending to be wealthy, but you have nothing. You're a fraud, Judah. You've been exposed, and I would never waste my time on someone like you." Judah's face drained of color. His secret, the one he had carefully guarded for so long, was out. Janet had discovered, not long ago, that the fancy cars he drove and the expensive clothes he wore weren't his. He had been living a lie, pretending to be rich to impress Gifty. But now everything had come crashing down. Humiliated, Judah turned and walked away, his head hanging low in shame. He had lost everything, Gifty, his dignity, and now even Janet's respect. The next morning, Sam gathered his courage and went to speak to Gifty. He had spent the night thinking about everything, his lies, the pain he had caused her and her father, and the future he still hoped to build with her. Sam knew he had made mistakes, but his feelings for Gifty were real. He found her outside the house, her face still marked by the pain of the past few days. Sam approached her slowly, his heart heavy with regret. He told Gifty that he was ready to take her back to the city with him, that he wanted to make things right. He spoke of a life they could share away from the village, where she would never have to struggle again. Sam promised that he would take care of her and her father, that they would never want for anything. But Gifty's face remained hard, her eyes filled with sadness. She looked at Sam, not with anger this time, but with disappointment. She told him she couldn't go with him. The wounds from his deception were still too fresh, and she wasn't ready to leave everything behind. Sam tried to explain himself once more, to tell her how much he cared for her, but Gifty's mind was made up. Without another word, she turned and went to find her father. Together, Gifty and Francis gathered their tools and prepared to head to the farm. As they walked away, Sam stood there, watching them disappear down the path, his heart aching, knowing that his lies had cost him more than he ever imagined. He had come to the village searching for love, but now he was left with nothing but regret. At the farm, Gifty worked silently beside her father, her mind swirling with thoughts of Sam. She had cared for him deeply, had even started to imagine a life with him, but the betrayal was too much to bear. Her father, though quiet, shared her pain. He had trusted Sam, had sold his land for him, only to find out that the man he had opened his home to was living a lie. As Sam sat alone, thinking about what to do next, Janet came to see him. She had heard about the problems between him and Gifty and saw this as a chance to get closer to him. She walked up to him, pretending to be concerned, but her real plan was to lie and twist the truth. Janet told Sam that Gifty wasn't as good as she seemed. She said Gifty had been pretending to be a decent girl, but she wasn't. Janet claimed Gifty was only playing him and wasn't truly interested in him. She went further, saying Gifty was flirting with other men in the village and didn't really care about him. Her words hit Sam hard, and he didn't know what to believe. Then Janet told Sam that she liked him. She said she had admired him from the start, even when he was begging on the street pretending to be poor. She tried to make Sam believe that she was the one who really cared for him, not Gifty. Sam, who had been quietly listening, finally asked her a question. "If you like me, why didn't you say something when I was pretending to be crippled? Why wait until now?" Janet quickly replied, "I was waiting for the right time. I didn't want to get in the way while you were sorting things out with Gifty." Sam's face grew serious. He had heard enough. "Get out," he said firmly. "I know what you're doing, Janet. You're just after my money. You're spoiled and selfish, nothing more than a gold digger." Janet's face turned red with anger and shame. She hadn't expected Sam to reject her like this. She stormed out of the house, embarrassed and upset. As she left, she muttered curses under her breath, blaming Gifty for everything. Janet thought, if it weren't for Gifty, I could have had Sam. Days passed, and Sam tried everything to convince Gifty and Francis to come with him to the city. He apologized over and over, explaining that he never meant to hurt them. But the damage was done. Gifty couldn't trust him anymore, and Francis felt betrayed. No matter what Sam said, they couldn't see him the same way. Sam felt sadder and more lost than ever. This family, who had shown him real kindness, didn't care about his money. They took him in, gave him food, and treated him like family when they thought he had nothing. It was the love he had always wanted, but now, because of his lies, he had ruined everything. One morning, Sam decided it was time to leave the village. He knew staying any longer would only cause more pain. He couldn't stand to see the hurt in Gifty's eyes or the disappointment in Francis's face. So, with a heavy heart, he packed his things and got ready to go back to the city. Before he left, Sam sat in the house one last time, remembering all the moments he had shared with Gifty and her father, the laughter, the warmth, and the hope that he could have had something real with them. It was hard for him to walk away from the only family that had ever truly loved him. As Sam walked down the road, leaving the house behind, he looked back one last time, his heart aching, knowing that this place had once felt like home. The love he had been searching for his whole life had been here, but he lost it because of his lies. With the sun setting in the distance, Sam kept walking, the village slowly fading behind him. His mind was full of regret. No amount of money could fill the emptiness he felt now. The love he had ruined was something money couldn't buy. As Sam walked away from Gifty's home, her heart shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she cried for hours. She had fallen in love with Sam despite everything, and now he was gone. Her mind was full of regret. She questioned why she had let him go, why she had allowed her anger to push him away. Though he had lied about his identity, she knew deep down that he had a good heart. She had seen the kindness in his eyes and felt the warmth in his presence. Now all of that was gone, and she couldn't help but feel that she had made a terrible mistake. Back in the city, Sam's mother was the first to see him as he arrived at their mansion. The moment she laid eyes on her son, she ran to him, her arms wide open. She hugged him tightly, tears of relief in her eyes. "Thank God you're back," she said, holding him close. "We were so scared. Where have you been?" Sam sighed deeply and sat down to explain everything. He told her about the village, how he had pretended to be poor to find true love, and how he had met Gifty and her father, Francis. He told her how kind they were, how they had taken care of him, and how he had fallen in love with Gifty. His mother listened quietly, her heart softening with every word. She felt pity for her son, understanding how much this family had meant to him. When Sam finished his story, his mother looked at him with sadness in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sam. It sounds like they truly cared for you. But life can be cruel sometimes. Maybe it's for the best. You'll find love again, I'm sure." Just then, the front door opened, and Sam's father entered. He was a tall, stern man, a successful businessman and a politician well respected in his community. His father had been focused on one thing for the past year, becoming the governor. He had connections, plans, and strategies to ensure his victory in the upcoming election, and for him, everything was falling into place, except one thing, Sam's marriage. Sam's father barely glanced at him before heading straight to his study. Sam followed him, knowing he had to explain everything. When he reached his father's office, he stood by the door, waiting for his father to acknowledge him. "Father, I'm back," Sam said. His father nodded without looking up from his papers. "So, you finally decided to return. Where have you been all this time?" Sam explained the entire situation again, hoping for some understanding. But as he spoke, his father's face remained cold and indifferent. When Sam finished, his father leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Good," his father said after a moment of silence. "I'm glad she rejected you." Sam was stunned. "What?" "I never supported this nonsense from the beginning," his father continued. "Going off to a village pretending to be someone you're not, all to find true love, it was foolish." Sam's heart sank. He had hoped for at least a little sympathy from his father, but he should have known better. His father had never cared about love or emotions. For him, everything was about business and connections. "Listen to me, Sam," his father said, his tone sharp. "You are my only son, and I have a lot riding on you. I have already made plans for you to marry Chief Timothy's daughter. You know this. Chief Timothy is key to me winning the governorship election, and I won't let